The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities.
Hey, I'm going to go over a bunch of different common Q&A, question and answer pertaining to hiring. Police hiring is the focus. However, a lot of these will carry over to firefighting and other public safety positions. If you haven't yet, make sure to check out Blue Grit Radio, the podcast. There are a lot of specific episodes when you scroll through and search for hiring, oral boards, background, polygraph, even the psych exam. So we can go into much more detail there, but here we go. The first question is, what is on the written exam and how do I study for it? So there's a lot of different capacities and every test is going to be different across the nation or beyond. But the main things they're trying to get at is multiple choice, basic reasoning. That's going to fall into some very basic math. That's going to fall into reading comprehension, where they present a scenario or an issue. It might be police related, it might not be. And they want to see if you can quickly review the information and then answer the questions correctly, appropriately. Make sure to check out my episode about test taking strategies as far as it comes to the written. There's also going to be different elements that try to get at your spatial awareness or your geography abilities. So in the test, they might provide an example of a map and then ask you different things that you can only answer accurately if you can read the map and you can discern which way is north from the point in question, etc. Another one is just to get at general spatial awareness. So if you don't have a very mechanical, technical brain, these will be the things you might want to consider studying. So for example, maybe imagine a three-dimensional object. Maybe there's a drawing of one side and there's a drawing of another side. And there's a question about how that thing might be oriented, or if you have a couple angles, how you can answer a question about the other side that it might show. So now you're going to see how a visual acuity and understanding about how things work mechanically might help you out. So how do you study for these things? A lot of us are out of practice unless we just came out of academia to be able to answer all these questions on the fly. In general, there are specific guides and test-taking materials where you can do practice tests. A lot of these vendors will offer practice tests if you are going through a third party. Most agencies now, unless they're huge cities and departments, will go through a third-party vendor. So I highly recommend you get those practice tests where you do some sort of a study guide in that regard. But otherwise, you can do basic reading. You can find a lot of free tests and resources online that will get at your reading comprehension. You can also practice math. There's different apps and kind of brain puzzle apps and games you can play that get you in the habit of getting information and rolling it out really quickly, right? Or being able to do some mental math. You might even practice reading something quicker than you normally would, and then having someone grill you, right? Even quiz you on how that looks. So there's a lot of ways to approach this for geography, and I do talk about this before, but a lot of us aren't very keen on where we are, right? And so that's something you definitely want to learn in any of these types of jobs. So start recognizing where you're going. Start driving an alternate route without using your GPS for everything, especially if this is your hometown, especially if this is an area you should be more familiar with, then take some back roads, figure out some different things, and also just start practicing knowing which way you're driving, like what direction. Are you going southwest? How do you know that without looking at the little letters on your rearview mirror or on your dash. What are the educational requirements for a police officer? So this is going to be very ranged. Most agencies will require a high school diploma or a GED. So if you don't have a high school diploma, that's generally not a deal breaker, but you would need a GED. A lot of departments may require an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. However, I'm finding that even the departments that used to require a bachelor's degree, a lot of them have scaled that back. And I think there's a couple of reasons. One is needing a lot of cops in the last several years with record attrition, but also there's a lot of people in the industry that recognize that having a degree doesn't mean that you're going to be great at the job. There's a lot of people that are book smart and, for lack of a better description, street dumb. And so really the best thing you can do is apply yourself in whatever you are doing. If you don't excel in school, then do your best. Get through, get a decent grade, right? And get through high school for sure. And then if general traditional academia isn't your thing, then maybe going to community college might not make sense. Maybe going to a technical school or something that actually interests you might make sense, or joining the workforce, or joining the military, or joining Peace Corps, or doing something that you're truly passionate about. And we can get into that a lot more later. I talk about it a lot in my guide, which is a lot more about applying yourself to things you're passionate about, not just doing what people recommended you do so that you could get a job as a police officer or fill in the blank one day. Will my past drug use be an issue for hiring? And then questions about marijuana. So recreational drugs are looked at by society. This is not a personal comment. They're looked at by society and the US government a lot differently now than they were 5 years ago, than they were 5 years before that, 15, 20 years, etc. Right? And so recreational drugs have changed a lot legislatively and governmentally. Now, with that, the question is always going to be very specific to the agency you're looking at. So just like education, you're going to want to look at your local police department and look online, look at their website, see what the hiring guidelines and requirements are. You want to be honest through the whole process. So when you look at one department you might be interested in working for, and you count up the years or however long it's been, however many usages you have of XYZ recreational drug, you might recognize that Department A is an absolute no-go. So do not apply for Department A. But if you do more research and you look around the region, you might realize that Department B and C might entertain you, right? So look at those departments. Similarly, for education, don't apply to places that have requirements that you do not satisfy. A lot of those are very black and white if they advertise them outwardly, but keep doing your research and find the ones where you do align. And so back to drugs, that's going to be extremely context dependent. So candidate A that smoked a lot of marijuana in their teenage and college years, but now is a driver, a truck driver with a CDL, and has not touched the stuff in 5-6 years. Very responsible driving record, great employee reviews, very dependable, awesome attendance, super attitude, right? That might be a great police candidate, right? Assuming that they pass all the other metrics. However, somebody that doesn't use drugs very often is 32 years old, white collar job, very successful, has a family, but in the last year has used cocaine twice. That's going to raise some eyebrows and some question marks. Like, why, if you're so squared away in your life, are you now dabbling in cocaine out of nowhere? And if you do, cool, that's your choice. But why do you want to be a police officer? I'm not sure about the responsibility and the lifestyle choices and judgment that you're exercising here, right? So these are examples of how a hiring board or administrators, what have you, might evaluate the context differently. So when in doubt, check the website, look at the different departments, do your homework, and you can always reach out. I highly encourage you to reach out to the recruiters in these different departments. It'll say a lot, right? Can you have a candid conversation and talk through things without going through the formal process? But also, as you reach out to a handful of agencies, you will see a drastic difference in how people respond. And you need to pay attention to that, because interviewing for a job should always be somewhat of a two-way street, right? Just like they're evaluating you, you should evaluate them, because this is a time when you can be selective about where you work. Some departments truly take care of their people. They have great benefits, they have great resources, and they have an awesome culture. That's going to be drastically different than other departments where no one wants to be there. They're all counting down the days. They want a way out. And it's not a condemnation about the individual people, but the combination of the people is what makes culture. This is what I talk about all the time, what I write about. So if you're not, again, check out Blue Grit Radio, the podcast. Make sure you're subscribing and following there, and the newsletter where I talk about this stuff all the time. So bluegritwellness.com, subscribe to the free newsletter. Okay, so what about a criminal record? This comes up a lot. Like, hey, will my little transgressions in the past be an issue? Again, like everything else, it depends. Some of the requirements and the prohibitions or restrictions, what will be specifically said in their outward public messaging on their website with regard to hiring. Some of it's going to be more context dependent. So again, as an example, if somebody got into some trouble as a teenager, maybe even a significant crime, but now they're 33 years old, they're settled down, they have a great employment record, they manage their finances, amazing references, right? Solid family life, then that's probably not going to be a huge issue outside of a lot of significant, very violent crimes, that kind of thing, right? However, if somebody is 23 years old and got arrested in college at age 20, that might generate a lot more pause, questions, concerns. It's not a deal breaker. Again, it depends on what the crime is. It depends on how you're living your life now, which is why when I'm asked about hiring and being your best candidate, a lot of times it doesn't go to the technical things. I invite and challenge people to look at how they're living their life. How are you dialing in your fitness? How are you elevating your mindset? How are you living your life just to be a better, more developed, growth-minded person in yourself, in your circles, in your community, in your workplace, whatever that looks like, right? So how are you illustrating that you're going to be an effective member of this police department or this fire department, not because you studied hard, not because you said you would, and because if you give me the chance, I'll show you, I'll make you proud. No. How are you running your life now that is demonstrating that you are going to be an absolute asset, right? So as a hiring manager, as a former recruiter, as an administrator or leader, what I want to see is somebody across the table, a man or woman that is just presenting them as themselves, their authentic selves, but someone that is absolutely growth-minded with a fantastic attitude and great abilities. And so if you have a fantastic attitude and great abilities, and you are freshly out of college, then that's a lot of potential. If you have all those elements and you have been a barista for 5 years, but people love you, you have an infectiously positive attitude, you're a great communicator, you're a problem solver, you do things without being asked, you're a kind person, right? All these great character quality traits, then there's a lot of potential. Like, I want to see you through the next round. So it's so much more about how you do things, how you run your life, rather than what you did. And that's where, again, I invite people to think about what they are passionate about outside of policing. So not just, going to get a criminal justice degree and getting a security job because that's what you were expected to do or that's what you think would help you get a cop job. If you love these things, if you are passionate about these things, I do think you should do them, right? So if criminal justice fascinates you and that's where you're going to learn the most, that's where you're going to get plugged in, that's where you're going to get the best grades, then do go after that criminal justice degree. I'm not one to say no. If security sounds really fascinating to you, if you want to learn all the ins and outs of that industry until you can become a police officer, yes, there are carryover skills and traits. So why not? But it's not for everybody. And a lot of folks that they don't idealize that type of work, then don't do it just because you think someone told you to, or you think it's expected, or because that's a path that some people took. Okay, so the last question for this episode: what are the physical fitness requirements? That is going to range state by state, agency to agency. So again, look at your specific requirements. I do know some states have a standard, but then the departments might run their own test. They might have an obstacle course, right? So look at what those requirements are. And as I've said many times, and I'll continue to say, train beyond the requirements, right? So this is not to discourage those that are not physically fit. It is to encourage those who are not physically fit yet to embrace this lifestyle of fitness, right? Make it part of your life. Do not make it a testing requirement that you got to get over. It's all too common. It's really sad to say, but there are clearly a lot of police officers, firefighters, EMS that are not taking care of themselves the way they ought to. Again, I'm not trying to shame them. I'm trying to say this is a reality of life and the job. But ultimately, if you think back to when you wanted this job, think about what you knew you might have to do. You might have to bound up that staircase to save a life. You might have to get over that fence. You might have to drag your buddy to cover and safety. So, can you do that? If the answer is not yet, then train for that, right? If you can train for that, functional fitness, mixing some resistance / weight training, some good cardio, that steady state, like jogging, like rowing, and burst, like high intensity interval training, that's longevity stuff like stretching, mobility, yoga, breath work, power, like train power, like throw a medicine ball super hard, doing bounding, like practicing agility. Now I'm getting way more in the weeds, but I hope you get my point, which is hearing these different things should make you curious and excited about how you can push and find your potential individually. And everyone has a lot of potential beyond what they give themselves credit for, right? I didn't grow up around athletics or sports or anything, and I found a passion in it. And it was really exciting and rewarding to see what I could do as far as elevating my strength, my mobility, my speed, especially when I was in my prime in the heyday of the job as a canine handler. So all these things are possible. Train far, far beyond the push-up requirement. If it's saying you got to do 20 or 25 push-ups, train until you can get 30 to 50. And then you can feel more reliable in the job. Again, beyond what the test is doing. Not every test capacity is that functional, right? It's not that functional to be able to do a ton of push-ups, but it is a gauge of some level of fitness. It's not that functional to run a mile and a half with no gear, but it is a certain gauge, like a standardized gauge of cardio, right? So I'm not here to pick apart the fitness test. I've done that in discussions with different folks on different shows, including my own, of what would make a more apt fitness test. But the point is, if you take training seriously, if you're doing a little bit every day or every week to help your mobility, your cardiovascular output, your strength, especially strength to body mass ratio, then you are making yourself a better asset for the job. So I hope this episode was helpful. I just want to give some very common questions about the testing process that span from my time in recruiting till now, where I keep getting these messages and asks about it. So again, hopefully this was helpful. Like, comment, share, all the things. Again, follow and subscribe to Blue Grit Radio on your favorite podcast player. You're going to get a lot of insight that's going to help you develop your mindset for the career and beyond, leadership, all that good stuff, as well as bluegritwellness.com, where you can subscribe to the free newsletter. All right, take care.